All right, thanks everyone for coming. I think we're going to get started. So this session is part of the Beyond Postmortem series. We have a series of 4 sessions. This one has a session title of,
You have to click on the screen to get it to...
Oh. Sorry, just a moment.
There you go. Yeah. Just click on it and then you'll be able to advance the slides. Oh, you can use the arrows.
Use the arrows?
It just needs to know that that's the...
Okay, great. So the title for this session is Blueprints for a Better Bureaucracy. We're going to be focusing a little bit on the structure of USAID. Yesterday we talked about the technical approaches. We wanted to get everyone's opinions on the good and the bad of what USAID did. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about how we did it. Today at lunch we have our 3rd series in the session. That's going to focus more on the politics and policies surrounding USAID WASH. So we're going to be looking at the global water strategy and coordination across the sector from the USAID Washington office. And then on Wednesday morning at the same time in the same location, we're going to be looking at the approach to research and learning that the USAID WASH team used. The objective of this series is to try and record some of the institutional memory, but also some of the sector memory of USAID. USAID has been largely dismantled. There is a few projects that have continued, but for the most part, we are a shadow of what we once were. All of the colleagues that we had on the WASH team globally, as far as I know, there's only one that has continued to be employed. So this is devastating in our perspective. This is devastating in the near term. It has immediate impacts. It's dangerous for people, but it is also devastating for policies and for institutional memory and for the learning that we have as a group going forward. And so we wanted to try and capture some of that through these sessions, and then also with the observations and the feedback that you share with us during these sessions, we want to try and synthesize everything into a written report. We're hoping to publish it in some sort of publicly available venue so that it can be available for the sector as it goes on in the near term, but also in the future if there is any swinging of the pendulum back in the other direction and U.S. government again decides to have some more significant investments in the WASH sector, we'll be able to have some memory of which we can build on again. So it's not just starting from scratch. That's the goal and the motivation here. So we really appreciate you coming and participating in this whole process. But one other thing I should say. So for this session, we've designed it so that we can hear from some people from the sector. We have a panel of 4 people joining virtually, which I'll bring on to share with you in just a moment. I'd like to have each of them share their perspective, and then time permitting, we'll have a short Q&A. After that, we'll have breakout groups. There'll be 3 breakout groups in this room, and then 1 virtual breakout group, where everyone will get the chance to share their perspective and their ideas, their feedback on the good and the bad of what USAID was and what we did. But in order to start things off, I want to talk a little bit about some of the basics of what USAID WASH was. So USAID WASH had, we had not just an earmark, as all sectors across USAID had, we also had a directive, and the directive required certain things. It required a certain amount of funding, it required a global water strategy and a reporting structure, and it also was structured such that the funding that was available around 95% of that funding was allocated bilaterally at the missions. So the structure of this funding distribution was highly decentralized. So I think that's an important thing to remember. And you can see the spread here. The dark blue countries were our designated high priority countries. There was 22 of them. They were chosen based on need and some strategic advantage where we thought that we could have the most impact. The light blue countries are a mixed bag of more strategic alignment. These were countries where at least $1 million was being spent per year on some kind of WASH programming. So they also had significant WASH projects as well. And then in particular, a few countries in the Middle East, in particular Jordan, Lebanon, and Gaza and the West Bank, had, at least over the last few years, rather significant funding from the Water Directive, and that was more based on geopolitical decisions and strategic alignment. As I mentioned, one of the important pieces of the Global Water Directive was the requirement of having a global water strategy. This was the second global water strategy. The first was in 2017. Each one was meant to last for 5 years, so we were about right in the middle of our most recent global water strategy. But Lisa will talk more about how that worked and the significance of that document during lunch, so please join for that. We had, within the Global Water Strategy, 4 strategic objectives. So one was focused on governance and financing. Another was focused on increasing access to drinking water and adoption of key hygiene behaviors, drinking water sanitation and key hygiene behaviors. Another was focused more on climate resilience and water resources management. And then the last was focused on reducing the risk associated with humanitarian zones. We also had global targets, and we were well on our way to meeting these within the 5 years laid out. There was a couple of targets. I think the Water Security Institutions target had already been met. They're pretty significant targets. 22 million people with new or improved access to water, another 22 million people with new or improved access to sanitation, and we specifically said that at least half of those people had to have new access to water or new access to sanitation. Now, we've been talking about yesterday being focused on the technical approaches, and today we're going to focus more on the structure. What do we mean by structure? What we mean is the rules and regulations governing how USAID WASH programming was designed, implemented, and accounted for. So the things that are most salient to me when we talk about the structure of USAID was the 5-year program cycle for project funding and implementation, the reporting requirements. USAID had a reputation of having some pretty heavy reporting requirements. And then I think a mixed bag of many different kinds of efforts towards trying to strengthen localization. And what we mean by localization is really engaging with and empowering local talent, local teams, and local decision making. Now, I would like to move over to the panel. I'm going to leave this slide up while I introduce them, and then I'm going to switch over so that you can all see their videos while they talk a little bit about their perspective on the structure of USAID WASH. So first here on the left is Chuchu. Chuchu has worked as a leader in the development sector in West Africa for over 20 years, serving different roles across West Africa, most recently as the country director for WaterAid Liberia. and previously with Water Aid in Liberia, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, and as area coordinator for Concern Worldwide, and with World Vision implementing agricultural products. Amanda Robertson is a wash and energy specialist focused on sustainable service delivery in sub-Saharan Africa. After graduating with her master's degree from Yale University, Amanda worked for Heifer International, the Rotor Foundation, and with USAID for over 20 years, with over 20 years experience managing people and investments in WASH, water resources management, water for agriculture, energy, financing, and governance in sub-Saharan Africa. And Nicole is a public health and WASH specialist with more than 15 years of experience leading multi-country health and water programs across Africa. She has served in key technical and leadership roles with USAID missions in Rwanda, the DRC, and Liberia. And she's designed and managed strategic initiatives that supported national priorities and oversaw the implementation and monitoring of health and WASH programs. And lastly, Tree. Tree is a senior development professional with 36 years of experience leading complex donor-funded programs across WASH, solid waste, climate resilience, and infrastructure. She's held leadership positions at USAID Malaysia and the World Bank, specializing in high-level stakeholder engagement and program delivery in Indonesia and the Asia Pacific. Her work strategically integrates gender equality, disability, and social inclusion in large-scale initiatives, and she's worked to promote coordination across national policies and programs, donor investments, civil society actors, and the private sector. So thank you all to the panel for joining. I'm going to move the window over. Just a moment, I have to find my mouse, apologies. So that the room can see your videos. I will ask you all to come off of mute, and perhaps we could go in the same order. If you could talk a little bit about your perspective on the structure of USAID as you can interpret that as you like. Let's start off with Chuchu. If you could talk a little bit about your experience on USAID structure.
Okay, thank you, and thanks for inviting me. And great opportunity that you ex-USAID WISE staff were able to come and organize this very important event. Now, quickly, how many minutes do I have, please?
If you could speak for somewhere between 2 to 5 minutes, that would be great.
Excellent. Yeah, so the structure of USAID, and I'm just going to speak based on my experience and mainly focusing on Liberia. So the first thing I really want to acknowledge is how much USAID contributed to moving the sector forward in Liberia, given the tremendous and difficult terrain, tremendous difficulty and challenging terrain, So from 2013 to 2017, for example, basic sanitation in the entire country, according to GMP, was stuck at 17%. But the huge investment, especially after all the support from USAID, move the country, and I think what USAID brought was to have that overall picture and put together a framework that supported, the ambitious targets that were set and the robust plans. So that was really great. But in addition to just investing heavily in the sector and improving lives and the needs, the program also provided some clarity of purpose and vision for the sector, introducing new technologies and new ideas, technical expertise, models, and all of that. And one particular thing that really helped was the introduction of the private sector. So on the design level, and Washington, I believe most of the colleagues in Washington, D.C. participated very actively, especially during the last country program strategy period. The country development cooperation strategy period from 2019 to 2024. When the design of the WASH program was done, there was a whole lot of consultation and involvement of key actors, especially within the sector. But one of the things that probably never happened previously, I think the inclusion of most of the key actors in terms of how the programs were designed, and also the limited information that were used, especially looking at data that inform decision about the design of the program. But I think that was later on strengthened. So at the first phase in 2010, we didn't see a lot of that. But then somewhere in 2020, we saw a lot of that. And even the sanitation marketing assessment by SFG that informed the county-wide sanitation activity in Liberia. So that was really great. But with all the investment, I think the overall ecosystem to ensure that the program were really sustainable. There were some gaps there. For example, the National Public Health Institute, after USAID had invested some $4.5 million in CLTS, and 2,500 communities roughly were triggered and declared ODF. After 2 to 5 years, about 50% of those communities were reverted back to OD. So the sustainability issue was something really big. And in terms of how the program were implemented, basically, sometimes the novel or request for proposal was sent out there and grants were given. But I think one strong decision was whether these organizations implementing some of these grants were locally established and locally known. That was something that we were confused, because sometimes organizations that were contracted to do some of this work were not known by the local people. And so the local, especially the government, were more comfortable with working with people that knew the sector well, that have been part of the planning from the initial stages. So basically, those were some things. But I think in the latter end, especially during the last strategy, specifically with regards to water aid, we were happy to be part of, all of the consultation, and even went through the process of being selected for one of the projects. And even at the same time, we went through the process and proceeded to the second phase for the countywide sanitation project. So that was really great. The eligibility criteria were good, but not supportive, especially of local organizations that have limited capacity to meet all of the requirements, especially when it comes to the high level bidding and technical efficiency, procurement, and all of that. The reporting requirements were really stringent sometimes. And so those big companies, especially contractors or private companies and big NGOs, sometimes came from other parts of the world. Basically, they have been doing this for a long time, and that put even Water Aid as an organization in a difficult position that we couldn't prime, even though we had all of the expertise. But we're not traditionally a USAID partner. So basically, USAID made great impact, especially after Liberia had been selected as a priority country. They changed the landscape and all of that. They brought a whole lot of expertise. And one good thing they did, the program also incorporated local partners, especially forming what they call the AAC Activity Advisory Committee, that was very, very active and headed by the WASH Commission. They included a lot of local and local CSO and local group through the grant owner contract arrangement and other mechanism. According to the contract for the access to improve safe drinking water, 25% of the direct implementation grant through CUGs were given to local organizations. I think that was a plus. But all in all, local organizations were not strong enough to position themselves in a way that they could fully participate and benefit. But sustainability was something that was clearly on the mind through some of these difficult and challenging situations. And the leadership of the country wasn't really strong, not just the country, but also private sector, the business environment, and all of that. So, for example, after the municipal water project ended, somewhere in 2018, it was handed over to the Liberia Water Sewerage Corporation to take over. And right after that, the new projects, improve access to safe drinking water, had to be contracted, or they have to embed that into their contract to take over the running of the 3 municipal water plant in Liberia. That was in Vonjema, in Sanikoli, and in Grand Cape County. So yeah, that's my first perspective, and I hope I can share further with you as we continue. I hope I didn't pass long enough for my time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chuchu. Really appreciate that. Um, Now, maybe we can move over to Amanda. The floor is yours.
Sure. Thanks so much, Zach. Like you said, I have been in the Kenya and East Africa mission for, I was there for 6 years exactly, and oversaw ultimately the WASH team and the energy team for our services division. We were very lucky in Kenya in that we had depending on, the time, 4 to 5 people on a WASH team, which really allowed us to expand and focus and home in on certain areas of expertise. So we had 2 engineers, we had a public health specialist, we had a governance and finance specialist, and that allowed our program to really, reflect all of those different areas and just do more and wider. I think one of the things about the structure of USAID, at least in the water sector, because this was very different depending on what sector you were working in. But in the water sector, I found that it was highly decentralized, which did allow for a lot of country level decision making, which I think is a very good thing. We had the home office, obviously the headquarters that we could always rely on. We had our technical support there, constantly in engagement with us, putting out, educational information, us feeding back content and stories to them. But in terms of us being able to really create programs that fit the context of the countries, we had quite a bit of flexibility to do that within the landscape of the global water strategy. And so in a country like Kenya, where you have, in some counties, 1% open defecation, and in some counties, 70% open defecation, or in some areas you have pastoralists, and in others you have hyper urban areas with thriving private sectors. We really were able to diversify and design programs that met those contexts. And having a larger team allowed us to do that as well. So I feel like the structure worked really well for us. And we also were in an office with 7 other sectors and had a great relationship with the environment office and health office, in addition to ag, nutrition, trade and investment, and nutrition and those that were within our office itself. So we had this kind of expanded network where we could make sure that we were layering our projects in a way that, for instance, if we ever took anyone out to see projects, we made sure they never saw just a wash project. They saw multi-level integrated projects that had obviously been designed with the other sectors and other interventions in mind. And again, I think really the structure of USAID allowed for that flexibility. Similarly, with donors and working with other partners in the private sector, we had a big focus on working with, others and leveraging resources. We were a key member of the donor group and chaired the donor group for 2 of the 6 years that I was there, and had thriving co-funding partnerships with UNICEF, the Embassy of the Netherlands, with UNESCO, with other US government agencies. And so again, it really was ours to shape, which allowed us to have a larger voice in the sector. We were the largest bilateral donor in WASH in Kenya, but we were able to still, obviously we weren't the strongest in everything. And so, for instance, we could work with, another donor that had a certain area of expertise, but maybe not quite as much money. Or we could say, hey, the World Bank has, funds that they need help unlocking. We can provide technical assistance to help unlock those funds. So again, there was just a lot of flexibility, a lot of ways for us to be creative. And I think the structure allowed for that in a way that not all agencies or organizations allow for when they are very top down or prescriptive. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Really appreciate that insight and perspective. I'd like to move on to Nicole, if you could share your perspective on USAID structure.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm glad to meet my former colleagues, and it's really a privilege to be part of this panel. So, as someone who has worked for USAID in several countries, I had the privilege of seeing how much the structure, the discipline, and the accountability of the agency brought to the development programming. So the USAID 5-year cycle and result frameworks, it really gave us kind of a clear direction and a sense of purpose. So we knew where we're going, what we're supposed to be doing, and we also had ways of measuring what we did and what we're implementing. But when I look back, and I have to recognize and I have to say that the structures that we had also brought some limitations. So many of the programs that were implemented in all the countries I worked on, the programs were already they were initiated after a global strategy was already established or defined. And of course, the national priorities were taken into consideration, but often they were selecting really reading the few of the priorities. And so it narrowed down the priorities to just the priorities that actually fit in a bigger and a global strategy, that I have to say. And the question that I have and I used to have is like, at which point or at when are we supposed to be doing to consult the national the host countries? Are we supposed to be consulting them at just before any global strategy has been put in place, or after? Because most of the time we're trying to fit in. And so if we look at localization, for example, it's really It's powerful, it's an aspiration for all of us, but it's not easy. And it doesn't happen overnight. And it requires time, it requires a consistency, flexibility, and because building local ownerships means allowing the local system to make their own mistakes, to learn and to adapt. But yet the 5-year programs, the cycle, were not really allowing countries to go through that kind of process of learning and adapting. So we measured short-term output, such as the number of people reached, the number of facilities built, but not always the long-term capacity that determines whether those systems those systems continued after the project ended. That was the main issue. Can we see the continuity or the sustainability? And I think Chucho also talked about that. The indicators that we reported on were typically designed to inform a global or to report on a global strategy. They told a story that, of course, the headquarters wanted to hear, and that was important to them. And focusing on, numbers, percentage, but missed the nuance of the local progress. We need also to have that, the voice of the local progress, knowing what is happening and owning that. So the number looked good, the numbers all look good, but the story was not finished. After you have reached all these people, what is the story after that? And so we didn't have that, because the project was ending, and we're going to a follow-on or to the next project. And so of course the system values accountability, but we need to have also the sustainability in mind after that. I'm not saying to criticize, but I'm just sharing my general thoughts, because USAID gave us a platform to learn what large-scale data-driven programs can achieve, but we missed that grounded local reality. So in my view, I think USAID has taught us how to plan, to measure systematically, and challenge us to think how to sustain. But we also need now to go beyond that, to go deeper, and to make sure that we have genuine commitment to local leadership, contextualize and have that flexibility when we are implementing our program, and thinking long term. So because in the end, true success is not the number that we report, but is the system that endures after the reporting stops. So, and that's what we want to see. All these programs that now are facing difficulties right now, or maybe were terminated, we are not able to really see, or maybe to really account to all what happened, especially now. So we want to see more sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Nicole. I think one of the things that I'm pulling out of your remarks just in the moment is how USAID was an evolving project. And while we had some success in trying to track progress, obviously we still had more things that we needed to do in order to truly be a localized organization, empower local voices, but also react and respond to the local needs and building a local sustainable intervention, positively impacting local systems. So thank you for that perspective. I really appreciate it. Last but not least, Tree, if you could share your perspective on the USAID's structure.
From Jakarta's evening time. It's my pleasure to share perspective from the USAID WARS experience in Indonesia for valuable insights of program design and implementation. First of all, I would like to share that the appreciation to the US government through USAID for WARS program is we are delivering an integrated approach, not only water, sanitation, and hygiene behavior. That's really one needed collective interventions is actually not only at the community but also at the local government until the national government. So that kind of things that's really missed after the stop of the activities. And before going to each of the parameters, I would like to also share with you all that the quality of the USAID war support in Indonesia is really well recognized. So every day, even though I'm now working at the World Bank as consultant at the moment, I receive almost on a weekly basis saying that how they really miss USAIDs on the ground. So this is actually providing a foundation for potential future collaboration and impact, inshallah. So I would like to share from the program cycle, the 5-year program cycle is actually aligned well with the host country government timeline. So it's giving us time to design it jointly with the government of Indonesia, and for the implementations, also allowing for a foundational year of mobilization and peak performance in the remaining years. So that's exactly perfect for the 5-year program implementation. However, a significant time lag usually happens between the strategy launch, and that's really the bilateral country strategy with the program start that delay the implementation. So I would like to suggest simplifying the program design and procurement process in each of the mission to enable new or continuation of programs to start promptly. So, of course, reporting, the second one, progress reporting serve a dual purpose, updating our stakeholders, including the government counterparts, and also informing what should we address for any possible challenge for future improvements. So it's really important to integrate reporting requirements into the design phase with regular checkpoints. The other things that's really important is actually the evaluation and learning components. It's actually supporting the monitoring function by tracking program progress and informing implementation adjustment as needed. So that's exactly something that's really important. The suggestions is the high-level indicators from the U.S. Global Water Strategy were largely quantitative numbers. It's potentially incentivizing numerical targets offer broader impact. So adding qualitative indicators as project level indicators are really necessary because this is something that we can align with the host country WASH development objectives. So overall, it would better capture the project effectiveness. So in terms of the localization effort, was successful in Indonesia. We empowered local decision making and also leveraging local talent. However, local organizations still struggle with complying with the US government through USAID rules and regulations. So it would be recommended to continue to reach out to them, giving the training, kind of the on-the-job training during the implementation, and if possible, simplifying the rules and regulation to enable local organizations to contribute more effectively during the implementation. So that would be my perspective from about more than 20 years with USAID Indonesia. So stand by for any questions. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tree, and thank you so much to all of our panel members. This has been a rich sharing of deep experience across the sector, both inside of USAID and outside as well. I think what we've seen is that there was a large variation across our different country programs. The highly decentralized nature of our funding and our program cycle, of our reporting, I think led to different levels of sustainability, different levels of localization. As was mentioned, I think that there was some success, but it was an ongoing project. And certainly challenges remain that we needed to continue to address, ranging from, Tree was mentioning, some challenges with the bureaucracy of USAID and the challenges associated with procuring funding from USAID, challenges of long-term sustainability and allowing for greater local determination when it comes to strategy and program design, as Nicole mentioned. But at the same time, there was flexibility, especially in comparison with other US government programs. As Amanda mentioned, the highly decentralized nature did have some advantages, and I think we had some success there. So given the limited time, I do have some questions, but I would prefer to open it up to the audience. If you all have some questions, for the amount of time that we have, I don't want to monopolize it. I'm sure, given the experience that we have, the collective experience on the panel, this is a great opportunity for you to ask your own questions. So I'll open it up to the audience if you would like to ask any questions. Yes?
Maybe it's my aging memory flopping here, but I thought at some point, it seemed in the last few years, that AID was making a cross-program, cross-sectoral effort. I'm trying to identify exactly what it was called. Effort to do more sort of reach back to programs that have been finished, completed. Ex-post evaluation, but not just a year or two after, but beyond that. It seemed to me that I remembered that, so what do I remember or not remember of that? Amanda, can you tell me, Amanda? You told me all the stuff I needed to know, Amanda, most of the time. So.
All right. So was the panel able to hear the question? If not, I can repeat it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is this the microphone here?
I would repeat it, Zach. This is Katie from online. It was difficulty here.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
Okay. So the question is, the understanding is that there was some ex-post impact evaluations that were done on some USAID programs, and just asking what happened to those ex-post.
And how long? How far out?
And how far out were they? The question was particularly directed towards Amanda, but I think given what Chuchu presented on, and also Nicole, if you would like to talk a little bit about long-term sustainability of programs and whether or not USAID was able to track that, that would be great. But first, Amanda, if you have an answer for that question.
Sure. So first of all, great to hear your voice, and sad I can't see your face, but giving a big virtual hug from Nairobi. So yes, so we did post-project evaluations of including ones that, Millennium Water Alliance were involved in. I think we, at least in the Kenya mission, and this is one thing that, again, varied quite a bit by missions, was I had one, for instance, I had an office director who said, I've never seen an evaluation that's worth anything. No one uses them. And I always said, I find that to be completely incorrect because, for instance, the entire WASH portfolio that was exactly halfway underway in Kenya when USAID closed was fully based on the evaluations, both interim and post-project evaluations that we had done of our previous. So for instance, like Kenya Rapids evaluations, which led to things like Stowie Mashinani, and others. And we have other examples of that. Also, I would say that these evaluations were fantastic tools whenever, for instance, we had a co-funded project like Feed the Future or Agriculture and WASH co-funding a project. And, there's always, the urgent versus the important. And so an urgent need would come up for agriculture funding, and they'd say, well, let's pull it out of a co-funded project. And I could go back and say, hey, let me quote the evaluation that we have of this project where we did that exact thing and I can tell you what the county thought about it. I can tell you what the implementers thought about it. I can actually quote governors and what they said about the detriments to their communities and counties by us only completing half of what we committed to. And so I think, it's all in how you use it, but we did have those. The other thing I will just touch on in terms of longevity of projects is that having worked in the field and in headquarters, my personal experience with the field was much more amenable to extending projects. Having a 6 or 7 year project, anything longer than that was, a little bit out of bounds. But asking for a 6th or 7th year was not an unusual ask. During COVID, it became the norm, honestly, and especially during, in places like in the Horn of Africa, in crises like drought or flooding and things like that. And so I think, we had more flexibility there that really allowed us to extend our projects as we needed to. We could even change and deviate a little bit. So for instance, during COVID, change that 6th or 7th year to a more project that a WASH project that targeted COVID and its WASH needs. But again, I found those evaluations invaluable and still have copies of all of them now that I saved, once the website and everything went away. So if anyone ever wants to see them, I definitely tried to keep a record of all of our successes and lessons learned and things like that.
I thanks so much for that, Amanda. But I'd like to open it up to other members of the panel. I think this is such an important question and an important conversation, talking about long-term sustainability, flexibility of projects, the ability to go back many years later and see what the impact is and verify that. And I think that the other panel members talked about that a little bit during their perspective. Nicole, could I call on you to comment a little bit on perhaps how you feel USAID did in terms of long-term sustainability and tracking the impact over time, and if you have any suggestions on how things maybe could have been done better, etc. Over to you.
Thank you. But Chuchu had already raised his hand, but I think he can come after me. But yeah, as I mentioned, so sustainability has been a critical, an issue for most of the programs, because of the 5-year cycle, and I think after Amanda has spoken, I think it depends on the mission and it depends on the country, the stage the country is at. Kenya is at a different stage of its development, and I think the need that Kenya has is very different from the need that Liberia has, where I'm currently based. Is very different from Rwanda and DRC because of their context. Like DRC and Liberia are both post-conflict countries, and so I don't think we ever gotten to the place of really evaluating a project post implementation. It will still continue we still need to continue to bring more projects, because the need in our countries are very very high, and so so that's why we're still talking about, we are really emphasizing on sustainability. But I think the project, at the end of the project, after 5 years, for example, I think the only question that were especially asked is like, what was the impact, or maybe what was the results of the program, but not thinking like, okay, is it going to continue after? What are the systems, or maybe the what was put in place so that it can continue after the project. Those are the questions that were not really answered or maybe thought about. It was only, the evaluation was only just to evaluate what was implemented, but not really to see if it's going to continue. So we have to think about, of course, sustainability is always talked about. At the beginning, we used to have a paragraph talking about this is sustainability and everything, but now most of the projects were not sustainable. If you look at the project that were implemented especially in Liberia right now, everything has stopped. And so I think we should think about that in a different way, not just having a paragraph, but having specific activity, specific a plan that will actually we are going to be able to continue to follow it up even after the program. So we think about that at first, doing, and also after the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. And sorry, Chuchu, I didn't notice your hand up. If you could also come in and talk a little bit about this issue as well.
Thank you very much, Zach. So I think first I mentioned how things didn't change a lot between 2020 and 2019, almost two strategic period. And then especially with regards to sanitation indicators and even water. So social impact was contracted by USAID Liberia, and they did a mental evaluation of all of the work that were supported, and including the WASH portfolio, and basically mentioned about the three municipal water projects in 3 counties in Liberia, as well as the WASH project at the time that was implemented to change access to sanitation in Liberia. But basically what the mention was the LWSC, Liberia Water and Sewage Corporation, which was mandated to take over the implementation and help to sustain that. Linking it, I think the entire approach was to bring in the business community, especially private sector, to manage that. But the Liberia Water and Sewer Corporation never had the support, basically, especially from the government in terms of financing some of their operations. Similarly, the approach of the community-led total sanitation wasn't sustainable. So basically that mental evaluation showed a lot, which was taken into account when the newly designed projects were put together. But I think there were a few things. So the USAID program continuously invested in selected counties that they say were priority counties for them, where, based on assessment and other criteria were selected. And that helped change a lot and made the program more focused. Also, I think what happened, the consideration of all the findings from the mental evaluation that happened in 2020 informed the design of the new strategy. But the only thing, again, a lot of people looked at was how the new program separated water from sanitation. And so it never came as a holistic package involving water, sanitation, and hygiene, as a comprehensive project. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Chuchu. And we are a little bit over time, but I would like to get Tree's perspective as well before we thank the panel and move on to our discussion groups. Tree, if you could talk a little bit about, I think maybe we can just stick on this same question about sustainability of projects and how that was impacted both by the evaluations that were done, but maybe also this 5-year program cycle. I know that's something that you mentioned a little bit about in your comments.
Thank you. So referring to the earlier questions about the sustainability and how we are going to evaluate, that's really something that we addressed from the beginning. So we got a project from 2004 to 2010. And then 7 years later, we conducted post project evaluation. So we selected a component of that project, and then we are asking the stakeholders about the progress at that time, 7 years after the project stopped. So we are able to get several results from, for instance, the water supply expansion in that area is really limited because of the availability of the raw water. So no matter what, the business plan of the water utility already plan to also cover so many percent of the populations, the raw water is still a problem. So that's something that we accommodated that in the follow-on program because that's really important. And then another one that we got from that exposed project evaluation is actually financing that the water utilities in Indonesia, as well as the newly established sanitation utilities, rely too much on the public funding. And then for them to tap into the private funding, they need really the credit worthiness path. So that's something that we introduce to them during the assistance while we are also creating access for so many people. And in the project that stopped in January, unfortunately, we plan an impact evaluations because that's really a question from our host country government counterpart, how to really continue or mimicking the success of that USAID, because anytime there is a program from the government compared to the program that we advocate, implemented, and making sure that's ongoing, there is a different success level. So we conducted impact evaluations. We already completed the baseline with the help of the USAID Washington deployed a team helping us with that. And then we are about to conduct the end line, but that didn't happen. So.
Yeah, unfortunately, very sad, but the work goes on in one way or another. This has been such a pleasure to hear all of your perspectives on the work that you have done over many, many years at USAID and also across the WASH sector. At this point, unfortunately, just because we're short on time, we'll have to transition over to breakout group discussions. I will say goodbye to our panel members. Of course, you are all welcome to continue to participate in the discussions online that are facilitated by Katie, but also we understand if you have other things that you need to do given the time zones that you're in. So thank you all very much. If we can do a round of applause for the panel. All right, thank you all. So for the panelists, I'm going to take you off of our giant panel, our giant screen here. If I can find the mouse, just a moment. So the questions for the breakout groups, and each breakout group will start with a different question. So if you don't get through all three, that's fine. A different breakout group will have covered it. The first is looking at reporting requirements. Were they worthwhile? What could have been improved? The second is the 5-year program cycle. Was it a good length? Should it have been longer, shorter, or tailored as needed? And what limitations resulted from the strict 5-year timeline? And then localization. Did USAID adequately engage in local decision-making, local policy prioritization, and local talent institution organizations? And if not, what could have been improved? So I think if we can divide up equally into 3 within the room, and I'll let Katie take on the online discussion. Katie, let us know if you need any assistance. I'm going to.
Thanks, Zach. I can take it from here. So.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Just make sure we're muted in the room.
Yes, I'm going to try that now. All right, try talking.
Can you hear
All
me?
right, I think you're muted. Katie, if you need anything, I'm also available on WhatsApp. Just let me know.
Great. I got it. Thanks, Zach.
So they don't hear us. How do you want us to start?
Catherine, we can mute the room.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much. We'll figure this out after a few more of these sessions. Thank you so much for supporting me. Well, welcome everyone. We have about 7 people in addition to our panelists that have joined our session. And as Zach laid out, we're going to go ahead and kind of dive into some of these questions. This is the second online kind of group that I facilitated in this series, and I was able to adaptively manage based off of our experience yesterday. So hope I've kind of figured out some workarounds. So thank you everyone so much for joining me. Just to kind of frame who I am, I was also once one of the colleagues that you just saw presented, as well as in the room from Zach, a colleague. I was the senior learning advisor on our WASH team. And so I am here to kind of help document your voices and hear from you. So something that we worked on yesterday was to make sure that we're capturing as much of information and insights from all of you. I will be going ahead and sharing a Word document with you so that we can kind of maybe take a little bit of time and reflect on your experience, whether you were a member of like the WASH team. So I see Oliver and Na joining us, so thank you so much. Or maybe you were a partner and would love to hear from your experience. So I'm going to go ahead and share a Word document with everyone in this group, and hopefully you'll all be able to access it. And I'm going to go ahead and also share my screen. One second, just making sure that I'm okay. I see some animals that have joined us, a narwhal, a bat, a zebra. I'll go ahead and drop in the link again, just for everyone's awareness. So it's like right at the top. So I know people were not able to speak yesterday in the room, and so there was just a lot of typing and me talking at people, just kind of reiterating and recapturing. I have a little bit, a
just
little
wanted
bit.
to
Yes.
recap to people. If you want to participate, please raise your hands so Catherine can select and unmute on a case-by-case basis, or we can do it as well. But please raise your hands if you want to discuss to avoid interrupting Catherine. Catherine, you may carry on.
Thank you so much. Yes, so we're going to start with the first topic, kind of like the last question that you saw on the screen. So what I would like to invite is if everyone wants to go ahead and take a little bit of time to process some of the questions that you're seeing right now on my screen in this first table on localization. Did USAID adequately engage in local decision-making, local policy prioritization, and local talent institutions and organizations? And then follow-up question around what could have been improved. I feel that once I've captured some of your initial kind of reflections in writing, what we can do is then move into the discussion and kind of hearing from all of you. So I invite you to kind of raise your hands and kind of elaborate on what you might put. Go ahead, Amanda. Do I have to unmute you, Amanda? I thought maybe in this
Sorry.
capacity.
Sorry about
Nope,
that.
there
I
you
think
are.
we're good. Yeah. I was gonna say I don't have to go first. I just thought I'd kick it off.
I love it. Thank
So
you.
I so I actually have a yes and no answer to this question. Because I think there's two levels of engaging locally. I mean, there's many levels, but I'm going to focus on two. The first is we had at one point when we were creating our country development our country development strategy, our CDCS, that literally we had a focus group in every single one of the 47 counties and spent an enormous amount of money and time organizing, getting input from every single county that it's hard to say at the end of the day was actually reflected in our country strategy. And so in some ways, I feel like we actually tried too hard to be localized in that regard. And the payoff may not, because at the end of the day, we still had to base our country strategy on the guidance of Washington. But we were convening 47 different workshops around the country for like a year to get local input that may or may not have been reflected. So in that case, I would say like, yes, we definitely engaged. On the flip side, I think at the project level, I would say we did not do a very good job of engaging locally. I think we put forth a really strong effort. And I think, at USAID Kenya, we had a goal of 100% localization. Like our health office had 100% local partners, and our health office had like $200 million worth of projects. So yes, we absolutely succeeded in doing it, but the level of effort it took to manage those projects, as well as the fact that I think when we talked about localization, in my mind, localization should be supporting local organizations to do what they do best. And we, because of our bureaucracy, kind of wanted to recreate them in our image and turn them into USAID contractors. And for small local organizations who don't have a bunch of people who can write proposals and do their M&E and do their budgeting, that
Amanda,
so what ended up happening ended up with CORAOR.
Sorry, like you just froze there for a second. Sorry about that, but you're okay now. You're great. Yeah, you came back.
Okay. Yeah. So no, I was just gonna finish by saying, so we kind of created them in our image. They weren't structured for that. And so we kind of set them up to fail in that way. And also we didn't anticipate adequately the level of effort it was going to take, because in de facto, what ended up happening was the CORAOR, the project manager in layman's speak within the mission, for all intents and purposes, became the chief of party because the level of management that was required and the level of understanding to understand USAID really needed someone internal or who had done these projects for a very long time, just because of our bureaucratic nature. So I'll end with that.
That was really great. And especially I like how you laid out too, Amanda, the level of engagement that you did in just like the initial kind of strategy development and bringing in like local voices to inform like those decisions. But it does sound like kind of like the ongoing implementation and management of those partnerships was a huge lift. So Choo-Choo, I see your hand raised and I see that you came off of mute. So over to you, sir.
Yes, thank you. Just want to add quickly. So yes, my experience is similar to Amanda's, especially with the last strategy in Liberia in 2021. The engagement was really thorough and involved a whole lot, so participatory. But so this one was great, but I think the previous one, somewhere in 2015, those that participated, those organizations that participated in all of the great ideas and contribution were to an extent not included in the actual implementation because of the limited capacities they had and experience with regards to working with USAID. So they were at the either at the back of the table doing implementation or at the back of the room, as you should say. And in terms of decision making, they were not at the forefront. Because if you look at the complexity with regards to managing USAID grants, you know, whether it's the USAID local office, the CORO, the activity manager, most of those people, especially for the context of Liberia, where is post-conflict, you know, most of those people have had to have several years experience and good knowledge of the entire system. Similarly, organizations had to be well bred with the USAID process. So it was difficult, and I think that's for me, that's what I see localization. But localization could mean different things to different people, and I think being locally led, you know, make sure decisions are led by the locals, even though welcoming the technical input and facilitation of USAID was quite great and important. But in terms of how the countries wanted the road path, the strategies to be, I think a lot of that needed to come through the locally led process or localization process. And I mean, I think I quoted there was a target of probably having 25% of USAID funding or partnership being local and or money that was directed to implementation, you know, going to local organization. But in 2025, probably had less than 10% of that happening. So yeah, that's just some of my perspective.
Other thoughts, and maybe perhaps any attendees that have joined, whether you want to ask a question of the panelists that have remained or want to offer some additional insights into your perspective on how USAID adequately engaged local decision makers.
Maybe until somebody can come in, let me just add another point, which was really positive. And so the project also implemented an activity by forming, especially the governance structure of one of our projects, the Improve Access to Safe Drinking Water. So they have the Activity Advisory Committee that was chaired by, you know, someone from the government, and then co-chaired by another government agency. And I think the projects were really aligned to local development agenda and supported a new framework that was developed called the Local Government Act of 2018.
Mm,
So it was supportive of not just localization from the perspective of USAID to country program, but also internally localizing development within countries. So that was a
mm.
positive, yeah, approach.
So the support, let me just get this right, Choo Choo. So what you're saying is the support also came from the national government or the host country to kind of
Yeah,
support like locally led development.
yeah. So okay, this is how I explain it. So Liberia is a country post-war, post-conflict. So most development efforts are centralized, and then they
Mm,
came up with the National
okay.
Act to support local government act, and USAID aligned that, and which was a form of internal
Mm,
localization or decentralization, I should say.
great.
But the challenging part was getting the right capacity to strengthen
Yes.
decentralization or localization. That was a challenging issue.
Perfect. Great. Perhaps maybe in the interest of time, if nobody else has like thoughts in terms of localization, what we can do is maybe move on to like the next bucket of topics that Zach has challenged us to kind of tackle in this online discussion, which gets to kind of the reporting requirements. And I think what was so great about Amanda and Choo Choo's kind of example of like their experience with localization, they talked a little bit about the complexities of USAID's reporting requirements and how USAID had to mold or shift probably organizations' internal processes to adhere to ours. So welcome anybody's thoughts. And again, feel free, hopefully you have editing access. If you want to just go ahead and type in the bullet or raise your hand. These are kind of two ways in which you can make sure to document your reflections and insights. So were the reporting requirements worthwhile? That seems like a pretty open-ended question. I mean, a closed question, yes or no. But what could have been approved? So would love your insights.
Sorry, maybe let
No
me.
one's
I
speaking.
hope I
I
hope
love it.
after speaking, it will encourage somebody or motivate someone to speak. But what I think I got from most of the partners implementing USAID
Mm,
projects was, we had in our program or project, requirements to give updates weekly, and quarterly, and to an extent give special report, annual performance report and field construction report once it was a, construction project. And of course, sustainability and completion report. So a whole lot, even grant report in some cases, especially for grant under contract. But the weekly report wasn't something that you could monitor and validate the information before sending over
mhm,
because there was no time. So, and most of the reporting, to be honest, focus on the indicators that were set and not the wider ecosystem and other additional outcome as a result of project implementation. So there were other benefits beyond the co-benefit aspect, the design
mm.
of the project. But I think everything was to an extent. I mean, that's my personal perspective. Sometimes it was so mechanical and very rigid and strict, and wanting to make sure you're accountable in a way that your focus remains on the core indicators that you sign up to as an organization. And so it didn't incorporate a lot and probably even limited chances for learning. But it was great that we introduced maybe pause and reflect sessions in our work and all of that. But it didn't really leave sufficient room, to look at other things beyond the design of the projects with regards to issues that were thought to be accountable for the indicators.
So it does sound like, Choo that perhaps like the quarterly or yearly reports were like more valuable than some of those weekly kind of reports and requirements
Yeah,
for a lot of
definitely.
your partners in Liberia, and just kind of like spending entire weeks just like providing weekly updates on the reports was like slow progress.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, basically, sometimes people never had the time to send in those reports, and
Yeah.
somebody just have to figure a way either through phone call without, verifying any information in writing. But weekly is too tight, to be honest, for the
Too tight.
kind of
Yeah.
grants, the size and how you want people to do that. I don't know what kind of sufficient information, especially with regards to learning and changes going to come through weekly update. But I guess, I don't know, maybe that was particular to Liberia. I don't know whether that was in other countries as well.
Other thoughts from the group? Or Amanda, I saw you shaking your head. Would love to hear maybe your perspective. What maybe even some based off of your career at USAID, if there were anything that you did with implementing partners that you adapted to kind of help with like the burden of like the reporting requirements.
Thank you. I would love to say yes, but unfortunately, I don't know that I did. No, when I first kind of was thinking of this question, I was thinking of the official reporting, like our PPRs and all of that kind of stuff. And in that regard, I actually feel like water was not, or WASH was not as onerous as a lot of other, we were not Feed the Future, we were not PEPFAR, we were not, some of these beasts that required enormous reporting. So we did get off, I feel like, luckier than some sectors. I think what was hard from an official reporting, like quantitative standpoint, was when new indicators were introduced mid-project. Like if like you'd be 2 years into a project and you'd be like, oh, now you have to add a youth indicator. Or, you've got Ukraine supplemental money, so now you have to report on that quarterly. And so I think, and then you couldn't roll it up because things had been inserted, halfway through a project. So I think that was one issue. And then I listened to Choo and I was like, oh my gosh, yes. Like the number of audiences we were reporting to and the type of reporting that they wanted varied so much. And it was almost all qualitative. So yes, our office director and our mission director wanted weekly reports. And it was usually just bullets, and they wanted it for, the staff as well as for the implementing partners. But I mean, I think, Choo and others on this would agree, not a lot moves in a week. It's a lot of meetings. And then after like maybe 3-6 months, you get your achievement. And so if you're writing something each week, you're kind of are forced to feel like you're either beefing up something or disappointing. And so, yes, I agree. Weekly reporting is too much. I even think probably monthly reporting is a little bit too much. I think, the quarterly reports were good. You could fit qualitative and quantitative data in there.
Yep.
It gave people a snapshot, but I really think anything below that, completely agree on the weekly, that our implementing partners and our staff were just like, we just don't have much to say other than here's the list of meetings I went to,
Yeah.
and I passed this document to this person for clearance, or, you know, now it's here. And then at the end of 6 months, you'd be like, now we finished a procurement, or now we finished a deal or a transaction. And so giving that broader space for the non-official reporting, but kind of the reporting that we made up as a mission. And it sounds like other missions did as well. That I think was LOE that was not necessarily well spent. I think it would have been better to just say, hey, if you have a really like awesome week where you achieved something great, send us a bullet on it. But otherwise, we'll wait for the quarterly report.
Yeah. And I think, Amanda, something too that your story kind of highlights to me is, you know, to what end? You know, you
Yeah.
talked a lot about like how a lot of the reporting that came up from like the bottom, from partners to AORs, CORs to activity managers, that all then was given to missions, which were then given to Washington, which was then given, you know, even further up to like, you know, I still remember, you know, Jeff getting and Nancy getting like talking points to go to Congress. And through all of that, though, what I feel like with all the focus on the reporting, we might have lost our ability to tell a story.
Yeah.
And it was all about like the quantifiable kind of pieces and not like the stories that were really kind of embedded in kind of meeting those needs. I do notice that I think Zach, I can see in the room, and Nicole, I think I saw your hand go up. I do, you know, let's go ahead and Nicole, if you had any thoughts, that would be great. I do want to make sure to hear from you. I saw your hand go up, but it does look like Zach is also kind of closing out the
Okay.
session. But Nicole.
Yes, no problem. I just want to say something about the reporting, and I think maybe it depended on the missions, because when I was in Rwanda, the weekly reporting was not really mandatory. But the monthly, so for me, the way I manage my activity, I used to meet on a monthly basis with them instead of them writing and sending long, you know, we just meet. And I have specific things that I wanted to follow up on, depending on what we had the past month. And so but the quarterly report was really important. Of course, after a quarter, you have a lot that
Yeah.
you've done, and yeah. But another thing that was also a bit like, for example, we're asking, when we're also looking at the financials. For example, if you haven't burned your budget, your quarterly budget, that was also an issue. But they didn't take into consideration what happened during a whole quarter. Like, for example, for WASH, there are things that you are not going to do during for the first year.
Yeah.
Constructions or anything, like some trainings you need. Before doing the trainings, you need to plan for the trainings, training manuals, you know, all this. So also the financial reporting also sometimes were also a kind of a pressure, saying that you are not implementing much because you haven't burnt your budget, but the
Right.
budget doesn't really show what you've done or what you're doing. Yeah, so yeah.
And I think, Nicole, that's such like a fine point to be like, a lot of times these activities were burning their budget just to do like the weekly kind of rigorous reporting and not actually able to do the implementation. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying on the call. I'm going to go ahead and drop this link in again to all of our attendees. You know, if something occurs to you throughout like the day or even throughout like this week as you're sitting in on sessions, that you feel is important to share. I welcome your insights into this experience. And thank you so much for staying on with us. And we're 3 minutes over, so I want to respect the virtual facilitator who needs to hop to a next meeting so that we can close out this session. It was truly a pleasure, and hope we can see you again at noon for our 4th session in the postmortem. So thank you, everyone.